Josh, free will is called a big question. Certainly, it's a deep probe of what consciousness and what human mentality is. But as a philosopher, experimental philosopher, why do you think free will is a big question?
Well, the question of free will obviously has very important practical significance, but it also has this other kind of significance. It has significance in terms of our whole perspective on making sense of the world. It seems like what we see coming out in recent centuries, say ever since the scientific revolution of the 1600s, is this tension between two fundamentally different ways of making sense of the world. This certain way of making sense of the world that came out of the physics that was born of that time, and another way of making sense of the world that's just our ordinary folk conception of how the world works, just our ordinary way of making sense of our lives. And in a number of different cases, you find these butting heads against each other, forming a tension. And maybe the biggest tension is about this question of free will, that our ordinary way of making sense of the world just doesn't seem to be fitting with this picture we see coming out of physics.
So describe both of them. Describe the picture we see coming out of physics, describe the ordinary feelings we have towards free will, and let's see how they butt heads.
Well, if you start taking, say, a physics class, what you learn about is these certain laws that link individual times with future times. So they say that if something's happening at a particular time, then at a subsequent time, with certain probabilities, another event will occur. But it seems like that's fundamentally not how people think about their ordinary lives. What people seem to think is that there's something really unique about human action. The human actions are fundamentally different from the action of, say, a stone falling through the sky or some water moving around in a stream. That human beings have this kind of special ability to go against these sort of causal processes. So when we conduct experiments on these kinds of questions, if we describe a universe that looks like the kind of picture of a universe that's coming out of physics, and then another universe that works almost exactly that same way, except with one exception, that human action is fundamentally different from everything else, then people from all different cultures, all different kinds of demographic situations, tend to make the same judgment that our universe is like the second one. It's a universe in which almost everything looks like what physicists say it does, except human action.
Yeah. So as an experimental philosopher, what can you contribute to that tension?
Well, what we seem to be seeing here is a tension between these two different ways of thinking about things. And we face now a further question: which one should we believe? So suppose that scientists are telling us one thing about how life works, but our intuitions are pulling us in a different direction. Then we want to know which of those is right. And there are many different kinds of information that we can use to get at that. But one thing that can be really helpful is just knowing what it is within our own minds that pulls us in this opposite direction. So what really is making us think this different way?
And what is?
Oh, see, this is a wonderful question. So far, we're getting a better and better understanding of what it is that people think, but what we really want to understand is something deeper. Why is it that they think of things in that way? We're trying to conduct some studies that will help address that question.
So what is how they think? They think that the universe is everything physics says, except for this one thing, which is the decisions that I make.
Yeah, exactly. That almost everything works purely scientifically, except for your decisions. The decisions that human beings make have this different character that somehow you can just decide to do something, regardless of how the universe was before it. You could suddenly just go in a different direction.
Right. Okay, so now with that tension, and so how can you begin to understand the deeper motivation of that?
Well, one thing that we're looking into, and it's very unclear whether it will turn out to be right, would be the idea that maybe it's people's motivations that lead them in this direction, people's emotions and so forth. So what we're trying to test right now, and we'll have to see whether it comes out, is whether we can to some degree eliminate that effect by making people feel worse about how they've been living their lives. So in this study, we ask people to think about times when they did something really terrible that they feel really guilty about, and then ask them whether their lives have this special character that's so different. Maybe then they'll start to think that they really are like a rock or like a stream of water that was somehow determined.
So then what you're doing is you're pressuring the human side of that equation and perhaps moving it more towards the physics?
Yeah,
That doesn't sound very nice.
Oh, it's true. We feel terrible to be making people feel guilty in this way, but at the very least, maybe it will provide some interesting scientific data.
Yeah, and what would be the implications if indeed you get that result?
Well, if we get this result, what that would seem to suggest is that the reason people believe that their lives have this special character isn't just that they sort of observe their lives and sort of impartially come to that conclusion. It's that they have a kind of emotional investment in it. They want to believe that they themselves are praiseworthy, that they're doing something of value. And it's that emotion that they have that's leading them to the belief in free will.
And therefore, it is a false belief?
Well, we couldn't say that it's a false belief, but we could provide some evidence that the fact that people believe it isn't good evidence for the idea that it's true.